Hello, I am Brock Stanton. I am an aspiring meteorologist, and today we are going to be talking about this enhanced risk for severe weather that extends from portions of the Texas Panhandle up through southern Nebraska. Though the severe risk altogether spreads a very large area all the way from the Texas-Mexico border, almost, not quite, but almost up to the Minnesota-Canada border. So very widespread risk of severe weather, and I will say there is an unusually high amount of uncertainty with this severe risk, despite us being 24 hours out from it. So I'll break down why it's uncertain, where there's some areas that I do have some more confidence in the forecast, even if there's a lot of areas where I'm not as confident in it. And we are also gonna, I'm not sure I'll have time to go over this, I have to get ready for work in a little bit, but there is this Day 3 slight risk. We'll see if I have time to talk about it further, but I should be able to make a video on this tomorrow, so either way I'll try and get you an update with that. Hopefully I can give you a little bit of an update today on it, though. And then also, there's this Day 1 slight risk, actually two of them. There's our probabilities, and this area that has the 15% significant for hail, as well as the 5% for tornadoes, it depends upon getting a couple storms to form in that environment. We're not really sure if that's going to happen, but if so, that it would support very large hail, perhaps a few tornadoes, and maybe a few damaging wind gusts as well. So what we are going to do is we are going to take a look at our HRRR. I will say I took a look at 12Z HRRR. I didn't have time to look at 18Z until now because I'm just trying to record it, so we're kind of going to be taking a look at this together and see, who knows, maybe this gives us a little more confidence in the system, but if it did trend a certain way, if it trended towards more moisture, that would be the thing that would signal it. But we're taking a look on Friday, and we're going to see it fires this discrete cell in south central and central Nebraska. Basically every other model besides the HRRR fires clusters of supercells in kind of this area here. I realize I never really mentioned the severe weather probabilities on Day 2. 30% significant risk for hail in this area here, 30% wind for that area and portions farther north, and a few tornadoes possible in these two regions here. Okay, got that out of the way. You can see that HRRR doesn't really fire this southern mode, though every other model does, so despite this, I do believe we're going to see some storms fire in this environment capable of damaging winds and very large hail. Tornado threat with that mode is uncertain. On moisture return, we will get into that later. I guess based off the HRRR, there is a chance that these, we could get a cell or two to fire up ahead of this possible overnight line as well, that I would imagine, barring moisture return, would be capable of all hazards as well. Yeah, there the temperature dew point spread is 25. That's too much to really get a tornado, but that could still support especially a hail risk. Taking a glance at it, the 18Z HRRR is more aggressive with the 12Z compared to its 12Z counterpart with this overnight MCS, or mesoscale convective system, basically line of storms, basically what it is. But it's still not super organized with it, so we'll have to see if this is a trend with it becoming more organized. However, damaging winds, perhaps some instances of hail and some tornado risk could be evident with that line. It would probably have to be a more organized line of storms than what the 18Z HRRR is currently showing to verify that 30% wind. But then NAM does show that, so that's why that 30% risk for wind is out there. Also, you could get a storm or two to fire out ahead of it in the evening hours, and that could also help increase the damaging wind risk. We're going to take a look at our moisture next, just because that's it's a factor that's really hard to forecast with this system, so we're just going to see how the HRRR has trended compared to the 12Z. You can see during the day it does mix out a lot of this moisture, and we can see how by 7 o'clock there's these quarter of like mid to upper 50s dew points, and then it spreads west. It will spread west some, and that's will allow that line of storms to develop. And up here, it looks just a tiny bit moister than the previous run. We're just actually going to take a tiny bit more moisture. We're going to take a look at that and see if that's true. If what I'm seeing is correct. And yeah, it looks just a little bit moisture. So that's probably why that line is a little bit more organized than the previous run. But let's go back to the 18Z run now. And we are going to see, we're going to take a look at our instability, see how that has trended. I would think that at least with the northern mode it would have trended up a tiny bit with that increase in moisture. Again, very slight increase, but evident. And we can see how there's this quarter of moderate instability. I will say models that have more moisture have accordingly more instability for this southern mode, even though that's still more than sufficient. Yeah, instability trended up a little bit from last run with the HRIP, there was never this quarter of 2000 K. So that just shows how, again, it's just a little bit moisture on this run. And no storms really fire in this environment on the HRIP bar. However, I think it's likely that storms do form because you can see very little convective inhibition. There's sufficient lapse rates, moderate CAPE, temperature dew point spread really isn't there for a tornado risk. So to me, this would look like a damaging wind and hail threat with this southern mode. But if greater moisture develops, there could be some tornadoes with it as well, and that's why there's that 5% for tornadoes out. And because moisture is really one of the bigger things limiting the tornado potential for this event. So there's our CAPE. We're going to take a look at our lapse rates and just kind of see how this is going to be favorable for very large hail. And this is actually kind of interesting what the HRIP does. These lapse rates kind of decrease here in this quarter. But go back a little earlier, we can see how overall the lapse rates are going to be very favorable for hail, and that's why there is that significant risk for hail out as well across quarter. That's roughly like what here. So our lapse rates, they're not quite as favorable, especially for the southern mode on the HRRR, but that seems to be an outlier right now. But still interesting to see that. We're going to take a look at our shear next to kind of assess our damaging wind and tornado threat. For the tornado threat, if we get greater moisture. And we can see how our low-level jet, by 7 o'clock here, it's going to be sufficient, or more than sufficient, to support a tornado threat. But again, the moisture with this system, it's very iffy, so I just don't know if we'll have enough moisture to support a tornado threat. And the reason that we need moisture to have a tornado threat is that basically, generally, if our temperature dew point spread gets more than 20, it makes it almost impossible to have a funnel reach all the way down to the ground because the storm bases become too high. And we're seeing a lot of instances where that seems to be the case on the HRRR, which casts a huge amount of uncertainty on the tornado risk. But we can overall see, again here, temperature dew point spread well over 20, but you can see there is some of that curving in the hodograph. So if moisture were to be greater, then a tornado threat would be supported in that sounding. And where I do expect storms to fire, let's just take a look. Still, temperature dew point spreads of 25, and that turning in the hodograph, again, would say if moisture is a little bit greater, then perhaps we could see a tornado threat with that, but 25 really just isn't going to happen. And we're going to take a look at our bulk shear next, just to see what our deep wear shear environment's looking like. And it's going to be sufficient here. We can see by 0Z for the afternoon even hours, have sufficient shear for these supercells that will likely form. And then it will increase some for the overnight mode as well, but not be quite as much there, maybe 30 to 40 knots. But still, given likely moderate instability, if we can get enough moisture in there to help organize those storms, then we could see that line of storms organize and produce again, this is the big if, that could support a widespread damaging wind risk in perhaps a few tornadoes, but we don't really know how the line of storms is going to organize with that. And to give you a different opinion, we're going to take a look at the NAM now. We're going to have to stick to the 12Z because the 18Z hasn't loaded in enough to show the system yet, unfortunately. As we switch over to the NAM here, we're going to see that storms are going to develop here along this, went a bit too fast, develop along this quarter here in parts of the Texas Panhandle up through western Kansas. And this is not that line of storms, this is the evening round of supercells, and while there is some clustering, which, cluster 2 storms could form, I'm not ruling that out, but the NAM has a bias to form more of a line of storms compared to supercells. That's just a way a bias in the model works. So the fact that it is still showing some supercells does give me pretty high confidence that we will see some supercell storms to form, and the environment is overall favorable of very large hail and a little more moisture, so we could see some tornadoes with that. A few tornadoes, it's possible. You can see it's a little better, 80/58, but that's still 22, so the tornado threat is still highly in question. And we can see how the NAM develops a stronger line of storms because of this will likely be more sufficient moisture. Yes, see 68/63. It's a very good temperature dew point spread to support all hazards, probably damaging winds and tornadoes just given the storm mode. You can see it will weaken some. This is about 4 in the morning now, but take note how this mode doesn't even really start to initiate until that's going to be about 10 o'clock at night, so that's pretty late. So that mode, how it evolves, will happen overnight, so you need to make sure you have your way to get a warning into the overnight hours, severe thunderstorm warning or tornado warning, because severe thunderstorms can still cause damage, and if you're not properly aware of it, they can still be quite dangerous. We're gonna take a look just a little further north and just see how storms evolve them a little further north, because I saw them hinting at doing that as well quickly. You can see these storms do develop. I will say their storms will have a risk of really of all hazards. So again, overall, with the setup, the tornado threat's very uncertain, so it could end up just being a wind and hail threat, but you can see these storms do evolve up here as well, develop into that line of storms. Occurs to me that I never took a look and saw what the HRRR did this far north. So we're going to take a look at that quickly to see what it does. I'm not going to go too far in depth on it. You can see, yeah, these initial supercells develop, and then that line does eventually try and form. So again, sorry I'm not going as much in depth up here. I'm on a very limited time schedule, but yeah, they could also see a couple supercells here capable of large hail and damaging winds, perhaps a tornado or two as well, dependent on that moisture. But let's get back to the NAM, and let's take a look at the moisture now. To go back a little farther south, to see how the NAM places moisture. Go back to 12Z, and we're going to see how overall, see how there's these widespread quarter of 60 dew points. Yes, it does still mix out some down there into the Texas and western Oklahoma and Kansas, but overall, especially for this overnight mode, notice how there's going to be a lot more moisture for it. So again, across this quarter here, the moisture is still going to be iffy for that tornado risk, but you don't need as much moisture for a hail risk, because storms can be high based and still produce very large hail, so that doesn't really matter as much. I mean, it contributes to the instability, which is important, but as far as storm bases go, it really doesn't matter as much, and that's why the hail risk is going to be maximized, because of most of the other ingredients being there for severe weather, and with the risk not mattering, the storm heights not mattering as much for hail. That's why that hail risk is going to be heightened, where we see those discrete cells likely develop. Let's take a look at our lapse rates again, just to kind of show the elevated hail risk. Gonna see if it does that thing where it kind of mixed it out like they trip warp. I don't think it will, if I recall correctly. Yeah, we can see sufficient lapse rates, and this is a solution I buy more into, I think. These lapse rates widespread over 7, perhaps up to 8.5 lapse rates, which is the rate at which temperatures are cooling aloft, and these are the mid-level lapse rates. Very important for hail. And we can see they're generally going to be pretty favorable. So that seems to be kind of just like a weird fluky thing what the HRRR did there. Yeah, so that really supports that large hail risk, very large hail risk, especially with discrete supercells. And let's take a look at our CAPE, and we're going to see with the moisture being just a little bit more on the NAM, there's going to be a much more instability. I'm just curious to see what a sounding is up here. I don't think it fired a storm, but I'm just curious what it looks like. So, okay, so they're kind of interesting sounding. So, there's very little convective inhibition, a lot of CAPE, decent enough temperature dew point spread of 19. But it doesn't look like the strongest low level shear has arrived yet, though. So it'll be interesting to watch if a storm could fire up there. You could also probably see an isolated tornado up there as well. But let's take a look further south here. So this is the main thing I wanted to focus on. And you can see temperature dew point spread there still isn't there. So tornado risk seems very conditional or uncertain, really, with this entire setup. And unfortunately, that's just the way it's going to be. We're going to maybe be able to figure out day of, but day before it's going to be really hard to determine it. But we can still see this quarter of moderate to strong instability develop, and that will support our damaging wind and hail risk with those supercells. Yeah, so let's take a look at our low-level jet now, or 850 jet, and we're going to see, as we get to the evening hours, we can see there's this quarter of that 50-knot low-level jet, over 40 knots across almost the entire severe risk area, so that would support any area that we're able to see that greater moisture, that tornado that would be able to evolve. Our low-level shear is going to be favorable for it. Again, in that overnight hours, if this line of storms is able to mature, there's going to be strong low-level winds pumping into it to support that damaging wind and tornado risk. And again, if that line could really develop and mature, there could be a more widespread damaging wind risk, but I just don't really know that's going to be the case. And then we're going to take a look at our bulk shear, and then take a quick look at our storm relative helicity values, just very quickly. You can see we're going to have, very similar to the HRRR, we're going to have these sufficient bulk shear values across most of the risk area, basically the entire risk area, the entire enhanced risk area. So there's that, and then our storm relative helicity values are on the NAM look they look surprisingly low considering the low level shear we have. But so again, that's another thing that could potentially limit the tornado potential, despite that strong 850 jet. So the 0 to 3 level ones are going to be more sufficient. If I recall correctly, yes, they're going to be much more sufficient. So perhaps that could help make up for the lower levels in the 0 to 1 kilometer, but still, so that question in the 0 to 1 level wind shear and our moisture makes our tornado threat quite uncertain, but I do think it will exist. So I believe that's gonna, that's good. That's gonna be the end of the video. So I hope you enjoyed. Hopefully you're able to take something away from this video, and please consider liking and subscribing and following me on Twitter. Link will be in the description, and I will talk to you about the day 3 risk tomorrow, which by then will be the new day 2 risk. But I will see you next time. Bye.